you don't want to necessarily be known as somebody who can talk about everything. The best way to get word of mouth and to have a career and to have an extended conversation or relationship with anybody is to be known as the fill in the blank person, either on behalf of your company or you as your company, or things like that.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 92. Not that we are counting, but it is 92 of the World of Presentations podcast, brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. My name is Boris. I'm the host of the show and the founder of the company, but that's not the most important thing. As I like to say in every single episode, the guest is the most important thing and the reason why you probably clicked on this video or audio. So who do we have with us today? With us, we have someone that's constantly laughing, to be very honest, which is something that you'll probably notice. His name is Dan Keldsen, and he's the founder and CEO of a company that many people nowadays use their product. The company is called PlexiCam. And if you don't know who they are, you may want to check them out, because especially in the virtual world, these guys are doing and having a product that actually allows you to bring your camera on an eye level, and probably Dan will tell us a little bit more about that, which from there on allows you to make very, very good eye contact with the audience, no matter the fact that it's virtual. All right. So what else? Dan and his company were also part of our first event, Present to Succeed. They were one of the first, not the first, but one of the sponsors of this first edition event. And now during this podcast, he doesn't know, but no pressure, Dan, whatsoever. We will probably see whether or not you will be joining us again for 2022. No pressure. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So Dan, before we talk and jump in the conversation, which is a very interesting one, we haven't discussed any questions, which is, I think it will be a very cool conversation from here, because just to read it out loud to everyone, and for everyone who is listening or watching to the video afterwards, this is what Dan wrote to me as a topic for our discussion, and I'm quoting here. All right, everybody, listen. Is a presentation to one audience the beginning of a longer relationship? Was that this one? Is the beginning of a longer relationship, or the end, or the middle? Right. That is the center of our conversation today. So, is a presentation the start, the middle, or the end of a relationship between you and your audience? But before that,
Right.
then tell us a little bit more about how did you ended up in the presentation industry and building and creating PlexiCam, because everyone in our industry has this very strange story of how they end up working in that industry. So what's yours?
Yes. I should find out what yours is, but that'll be a different conversation.
That is true.
Yeah, so that is funny, because it's I definitely, I don't know that I've run into anybody who's had exactly my path. I started in sort of a combination of computer science and music. I moved. I live outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States, and I moved here to go to Berklee College of Music, which was founded as a jazz school and then became an all-around music school. And before that, I thought I was going to do computer science, following my older brother's footsteps. And then it turned out, why not do both? So, but the part of all of that is, I was never really interested from a musical standpoint. I was more interested in the camaraderie of teamwork and making things together, and performing was sort of a necessary evil to me at the time. I didn't really like being on stage, but it was, if you wanted people to hear your music, you had to be out on stage,
Yeah.
because it may not look like it, but I'm old. So Spotify and YouTube and all these things did not exist when I was really active as a musician. And so I bring, so that if you're boring on stage as a band, nobody's ever going to show up, right? So you need to put energy into it. So to me, I feel like a presentation is, some people come at it from it's an exercise in persuasion, or it's an exercise in sales, or, there's lots of different ways to come to it, or really design centric. There's some people who use no design. They don't use any slides at all. you wouldn't know because they wouldn't be your customers.
Yep.
But there's lots of ways to come to it. But so for me, if you want to get engagement from your audience, you need to engage them, and that comes like when you're live. I've never had people throw beer bottles at me, but you may have seen the movies, the Blues Brothers, very old movie, chicken wire up and dodging beer bottles. That has not happened to me as a professional speaker either, so that's good news. But it's really what I'd like to bring to it is that any presentation or a performance or a dance. My wife is a dancer. If you're an actor, actress, it's not just about you. It's not just about the piece. It's what are you trying to get to with your audience. So if we fast forward, so I graduated in 1992, so that was quite a while ago,
All right.
and of course, life is ironic. So I decided that I wanted to be behind the scenes, and I went into an IT career, and I was not on stage. And then I realized that when I joined the company with my business partner currently, Tom Kalopoulos, that was back in 1994, and I had not experienced a lot of business presentations because I came from the music college. He was and is still one of the best speakers I've ever seen, and I realized, oh, the intellectual side of I have things that I've learned, some of them much harder to learn than others that I'd like to convey to other people. How do I do that effectively? And so thankfully, over the course of 27 years of working and knowing each other, not contiguous because we've gone in our own directions every once in a while, I learned that there's a whole bunch of stuff that I can take from the performance world of music, and I can bring that into the business
Mhm.
world, and that tends to be a kind of different approach than most people.
So was PlexiCam just a logical, how can we call it, continuation of everything? Like what happened there?
Probably not.
All right. So how did it
Yeah,
happen?
yeah. So I mean, another necessary evil, especially for virtual, you need equipment,
Yeah,
right? I mean, if you're doing
unfortunately.
a presentation in person, you show up, it's somebody else's problem to have the lights, give you a microphone, have the projection, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But when it's you on the other side of a camera, you need, like, I have two lights here, I have lights up here, I have lights behind me, I have three screens in front of me. It takes a fair amount, and I enjoy that because that's part of what I've had to do since I got interested in doing. So I played synthesizers primarily,
Mm,
and that's also a whole bunch of electronic gear, so I'm used to that. um, but for most people, especially during the pandemic, I know a lot of great, like, world class speakers who dominate a massive stage and they own it, and they could
yep.
be talking to 50,000 people, but they don't know anything about virtual presenting. They didn't have the equipment. They're not used to what's color temperature in a light, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so, innovation often comes from scratching your own itch. So Tom, my partner, he's always been a great presenter. He's always been a futurist and looking ahead at what's coming. So he started experimenting with doing video online about 12 years ago, and
Okay.
it was hideously painful, super expensive. You'd have to cross your fingers, hang up rabbit's feet, all sorts of things to
Yeah.
make sure that it would. You're like, please, please, I hope this works. Will the internet work today? And so he has been experimenting for a long time, and he's also a tinkerer. So he actually created something that is only vaguely recognizable as to what Plexicam looks like now, but he had created that about 12 years ago, and for no really good reason. The beginning of December of 2019, he picked the idea back up again, and then the pandemic hit, and he called me up and said, "Hey, you remember that thing I was doing a long time ago? I have a very different idea about it now. Do you want to be a part of this? I'm calling it Plexicam." And I initially said no.
Of course.
'Cause I was like, well, we've done software companies and consulting and research and presenting and workshops and all that kind of stuff. But what do either of us know about manufacturing, international shipping logistics,
Yeah.
all sorts of things. So I said no initially, and he started doing it on his own. But we had another company called Viventus, which stands for Virtual Events as a Service. So for all the people that need to produce events that don't just look like any other Zoom event that you've been to,
Yeah.
like, I think your event, I expected great things, and I was not disappointed because everything was very, high quality. The design looked great, the video looked great, the platform was great, but that's rare still,
Oh yeah,
right? And we've had a year and a half to
very
make
rare,
that
to be
happen.
honest.
So it's so that's so plexicam sort of accidentally came back to life at just about the right time. So we were working on Viventus and, talking every day, strategy, working on events. And we were shipping plexicams to clients to beta test them because we needed high quality video.
Yep.
And we can't make you look better than you look if we get terrible signal from you, right? And we're not plastic surgeons. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But so we would send these out to people with, you might recall a year and a half ago, it was almost impossible to get cameras.
Yep.
So we
That is
would,
true.
yeah, it was a nightmare. So you'd have to pay twice as much to get a okay camera
Yeah.
and just be happy that you had one. We'd send the plexicam with a Logitech camera. We coach them through that because most people are not aware of, how you need to frame yourself so that we can have good quality on the editing side. And um, and as we were doing that, I realized, well, these speakers, they really appreciate that we're setting them up for success with this equipment, and it's very simple. And we would send out, 50 at a time to 50 speakers and bring them all in, and it was great. And I finally said, this is stupid. We have the other business. I can see that plexicam is working. I should formally join you and make plexicam
Yeah.
happen. And so it's, yeah, I would not say it was a logical extension at all. It was kind of a leap. There's definitely a connection, but I would have never thought, well, most of my career I would have never thought was going to be in store for me. But owning a company producing a physical product in a global pandemic, I definitely did not anticipate that.
Yeah. That's a yeah. You definitely have a story behind both the presentation stuff and Plexicam. Anyway, then let's talk about your idea about like that thought around, hey, is a presentation the start, the middle, the end of a relationship between the speaker and an audience, no matter how large that audience is. First of all, when you
Yes,
wrote this, what did you have in mind? Like, because obviously from there, from your answer to this question, there will be more and more questions coming up. Uh,
sure.
one important note here, in the same way as with the conference, our audience here are business people, right? So these are, as I like to say for our event, you know it from last year, these are the people that are being asked to present whether they like it or not. That's how I define it. These were
Okay.
actually the people that joined also Present to Succeed last year, and hopefully will
Sure.
join in April 2022. Yeah, 2022.
Yeah.
All right. So
Yes.
tell me more about that that thought. Like, where did
Right.
this came from?
Yeah. So part of it is, like if you look, so I'll use from a music analogy, just hopefully
Yep.
most people can relate to at least liking music, if not playing it or being in a band. So, have you ever heard the term a one hit wonder?
Yep.
So, all the time that led up to that first hit is typically about 20 years
Mm,
from birth to around age 20, because that's when you finally get discovered, you get signed, or these days you self-publish and somebody finds you, and it might
yep.
become viral these days, right? So that one song, or if you're lucky, that first album, had a long percolation time. So it was an overnight success. It
Mm,
took a long time
of
to get to
course.
that point. So all of those, touch points and everything that you learned all along that, and which is the music part, it's maybe you're great at lyrics. I personally love words, so lyric writing is really my thing. Maybe it's about the energy. Maybe you're a maniac on stage and people love that and they're attracted to it. Maybe it's a punk band, and that's the experience they want to be. They want to be feel like they're part of something that's bigger than them and it's against the system. All that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Um, and I like good music. It doesn't matter what style it is. So no judgment whatsoever on your musical interests. But it might seem to the outside that one moment when your song blew up
Yep.
just happened out of nowhere, right? But that's not at all the case. And I specifically wore this shirt,
Yeah.
which is
Word of
word
mouth.
of mouth. .org. The
Right.
site still exists. The organization doesn't exist, but it was created by Andy Cernovitz, who created the Word of Mouth Marketing Association, WOMMA.
All right.
Uh, Wrote an awesome book on word of mouth marketing called, that's right, Word of Mouth Marketing.
Oh, wow. All right.
But it's, if you want to, I find a lot of presenters that think, if it's in a corporate setting and you're pitching to your boss or you're trying to raise money or something, that's a different case than you're presenting on behalf of representing yourself or your business to an audience for marketing purposes. At a show like you run, there's lots of different reasons to give presentations. But for the most part, if you find that, well, so I find that sort of the presenters who haven't figured out that presenting is a lifelong skill, and there's just one reason probably that you're doing this presentation that should, in my opinion, tie to a bigger picture on what you're trying to accomplish. Um, for example, so I've started up a podcast. I haven't published anything yet as of the date that we're recording, but one of my guests was Michael Port, who you might
I
know,
know him. Yeah.
and Andrew Davis, I believe is the gentleman's name. They co-wrote a book called The Referable Speaker, which came out a couple months ago,
Mm,
and they make a big point of this, which is part of what the reason that it's on my mind. That you don't want to necessarily be known as somebody who can talk about everything. The best way to get word of mouth and to have a career and to have an extended conversation or relationship with anybody is to be known as the fill in the blank person, either on behalf of your company or you as your company, or things like that. So it's really, but I find people that they get so, part of it is because they are nervous about presenting, so they get very focused on this presentation is live or death, so, and they get super worked up about it, and then they forget that the entire world exists, and they don't put the thought into it that makes it more likely that people will remember that presentation, take some action, refer other people to say, hey, this company or this product or this person or this topic is cool, you should hear more.
mm,
And then that turns into, a sort of a self-fulfilling
yeah.
engine of growth. But if you focus pure, like, you could be a fantastic presenter and you could ignore the audience, which is not
A good idea.
recommended, right?
Yeah.
It could look beautiful. It could be the best design presentation that's ever existed in the world. But if you deliver that presentation, you walk away, then what was the point of that? So it's just, there's lots of reasons. Hopefully, I'm conveying that, and it's just So I'm really interested in sort of sustainability of things,
Mm,
and if you're going to put the energy into delivering a presentation that's worthwhile, you should be thinking what happened before that can set the stage for me, which we could definitely talk about, and what happens after this that I should, did this kick into motion some other plan that I have that picks this back up again in a day or a week or a month or whatever.
yeah. So it's like a chain reaction. Like the first takeaway here is I hear you saying that if you have a one presentation that's coming up next, it's not just a presentation and it's over. You have to consider it in the overall scheme of things, like everything that you are doing, and not
Yeah.
underestimate the importance of every single presentation, because if you consider it as something important, you can extract a lot of value from it along the way, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I by the way, I always like to say that you never know. Like one good presentation can lead to just so many opportunities, depending on, as you said, is it the sales, is it the product, is the project management, is it like whatever type of talk it is. You
Right.
never know. Like
Right.
and especially for the people that you're talking about, the guys and the gals that are speaking at events and at conferences, where you cannot know every single person in the audience, because there are hundreds
Hmm.
or even thousands of people, as you mentioned.
Right.
You definitely never know. Like
Right.
who is there, what an impression are you leaving in them, what's going to happen just because you left that impression in them. It is just mind-blowing. I remember that when I presented Microsoft Ignite, which is the biggest Microsoft event for the year, or at least it was before the pandemic hit. I think it still is, but
Yep.
I remember that because of one presentation that I delivered there, I didn't expect, to be honest, for a ton of people to reach out because of because the topic is a little bit more niched. I was talking about presentation templates, on and on and
Hmm,
on.
okay.
But then there was a person who was in the audience who approached me afterwards, who turned out to be one of the C-level executives of the company that builds all the metal, all the all the metal and all of the all the metal materials and components that are needed to build the Fiat cars.
Oh, okay.
I was like, why is this person at the Microsoft event in first place? Like, I was completely amazed by that. But he approached
Yeah,
me to, of course, thanked me about the presentation, gave me his business card because he saw a lot of potential in what I was talking about, which is, again, probably, as you mentioned, like, what can happen after a presentation. Is that the start? Is that the middle? Is that the end? In our case,
right.
it was the start of everything, of this
Yeah,
relationship, right? So tell me
right.
about,
Yeah.
you mentioned something, you mentioned something that we can talk a little bit more about, the before stage, before you go to the
Hmm.
presentation. What did you mean when you said that?
Yeah. So, so once upon a time, so I was sort of the crazy analyst when I was at Delphi Group. That's when I first started working with Tom, and I started out as an IT guy, and then I thought, hey, what these guys are doing seems pretty interesting. I should figure out what that is, and it probably pays better, among other things.
Okay.
And I've always loved reading and writing, so research seemed like a natural place for me to go, and that inevitably, it wasn't inevitable for sure, but I sort of kept pulling at different strings that kind of sort of popped up.
Hmm.
And around 2003 or so is when wikis and blogs and RSS and LinkedIn was created. This was pre Facebook for the public anyhow.
Yeah.
Um, and I, as it turns out, I thought I was late, but I got involved in LinkedIn. I was like user number 78,000 or something, and there's like 2 billion users now or something ridiculous. It's kind of amazing to me that looking back, I thought, oh, I was getting all these invites. What is LinkedIn? I've never heard of that. What's a social network? Those didn't
First place.
exist.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
So it was, so then I was like, all right, there's some reason why this is taking off. Why is that? And then I started diving, because this is the way that my brain works. I started diving into network theory and graph theory, and why is the math behind that make it kind of exponential growth, which is, I know people are probably tired of hearing about the idea of exponential growth, but it's a real thing.
Yeah,
You can't control it necessarily, but
that's
you can
true.
take advantage of sowing the seeds that make it possible. Um, so there's a couple of things that I can tie to this. So one, Google exists, right? Maybe you use Bing. You might be one of the people
Very
out of
few people, yeah.
1,000 that are still using Bing. Yahoo apparently still exists. I don't know if you can search on Yahoo. I don't remember
I
that.
don't think
I
I
haven't
don't know.
tried that in a while. But you have a footprint out there in the world. So if somebody sees, oh, you're presenting on a topic at this event at this day, who's this person? You can Google them. You can find evidence of what you think or what you say or what you write or what you present or a podcast you're on or any of these kinds of things.
Yep.
And instead of the blurb that's there, you can decide for yourself, is it going to be worth my time that I might learn something or reinforce something or get inspired based on that past evidence? And that's a new thing. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that, like, self-publishing, there's millions of self-published books now that can be instantly published on Amazon, the biggest book marketplace that's ever existed, right? So if you want to attract people, part of it is leave evidence, leave things that they can see and judge for themselves. So it's much better if they can decide in advance that they already like you. That's part of what makes it much easier to connect with your audience in that one live presentation that they happen to find you in.
Mhm.
And I still find a lot of people who feel like, my presentation this makes no sense to me, but my presentation is special and needs to be locked away, and nobody should ever see it unless they see me do it live.
Yeah, especially with
I get
with
the
professional speakers. I mean, especially.
yeah, yeah. I think I mean, like, Tom Peters. is, he's an old guy now, but he's very famous as a business management guru.
Mm,
McKenzie in Search of Excellence. I always slightly mess up the book, but he has always for a long time given away. He has these massive decks, which is probably part of the reason I started using huge huge decks. But he's always, like, every single presentation he's ever given for the last 30 years or so is online. He gives away the slides because he wants those ideas to get out there
yeah.
and for people to find them and come back to him. And that's part of what I mean. And so a side benefit of that is potentially, who knows, maybe the guy that you were talking about already heard about you, knew that you had interesting things to say about templates, and he just wanted to punctuate it by verifying it during that one presentation,
Yep.
and then he reached out. So you don't really, you might want to ask him, was that the first time or not? Maybe he remembers. But and this kind of thing has happened to me a lot, which is why I want to make sure I share it with people. So, for example, the largest consulting gig that I ever had happened because of a tweet that I didn't even mean to send. And yeah, and I'm still friends with a guy who read it.
All right.
It was not that tweet though. It was everything that I had said before that,
Mm,
everything that I'd done. I had a podcast series at that point too that I started in 2006. I was talking about lots of different things, and it was the end of the day. I was rushing out of the office. I was like, oh, I have this idea. I should probably turn that into a blog post, but I'll just jot down. Should I do Twitter? Or should I send myself an email? I'll do Twitter. And I typed in the message, and I don't even remember, I could find it, but it was essentially, I'm seeing the intersection of these three or four ideas. Um, Anybody else seeing this? Something like that. And then next morning, I got an email. I got a direct message, and I got an email. I actually did not get it. It was only direct message, and it was kind of a anonymous account, which it
mm,
turns out that was from the legal department of this massive corporation, which was Lowe's Home Improvement, Fortune 42 at that point. Um, I had no idea there was somebody in a position of any power whatsoever. It was just some random
yeah.
anonymous account. Said, "Oh my God, you're the only person I've ever seen talking about this. We have to talk." Okay. I got a call the next day, and hey, I'm the guy that tweeted to you last night. Okay, we talked, and who are you, by the way? And his name's Kevin Davis. His nickname is the Data Man. I've been very good friends with him ever since, and that resulted in a totally no bid, no competition consulting gig.
Yeah.
That was a six-figure gig that came literally was punctuated by that one tweet that I didn't even mean to send.
Yeah, and that's where the budget for PlexiCam came from. Anyway,
It didn't
anyway,
last that long. That
no,
was like 2008 or something.
yeah, yeah, of course, of course. So yeah, what I'm hearing saying is, hey, treat your online brand, online presence seriously, right?
Yes.
Because you never know. Also, that presence, how it can pay off, right?
Yeah.
In the context of your business relationships, business world, and overall professional, or to be honest, even in your personal life, it may be, yeah. We have seen a lot of examples, I think, with especially with celebrities, where people just go back 7 years in their Twitter account to just dig in for something, like, and then
Right.
it becomes a mess in the media.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
But don't
yeah,
be afraid of Twitter.
yeah, yeah, of course. But yeah, that is very, very good advice. I think everyone should definitely be listening to this one, no matter of the platforms that you are using. I, for example, search, like, very frankly, every single candidate for for our company when we are hiring people. Like, I search them all over the web. Like, and I
Hmm.
spend, like, time trying to figure out, do they have this account, do they have an Instagram, do they have a LinkedIn, do they have a TikTok, like, whatever it is. I want to explore their whole life and see
Hmm.
what's going on, because
Hmm.
that gives me, as you said, signs and information who they are. And
Right.
at some point, you never, yet again, you never know who can see it, and maybe, as in your case, invite you to deliver a presentation on a specific topic. Or just
Right.
because of, I don't know, a LinkedIn post that you shared, your boss sees it and now thinks about you in a different way because the post that you shared was a very intriguing post, which means
Right.
that you're thinking in that direction, which now makes it very interesting for your manager to say to themselves, wait a minute, this person is like really obviously chasing another level in his career or her career. That's interesting. I
Right.
have to have that in mind, right?
Right. Yep.
That's more or less your direction, right? More or less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's
Yep.
in some ways that could scare people because do I need to watch everything that I say or do or post online?
Yeah.
Don't be paranoid about it.
Of course. Of
But
course.
it is, especially in larger organizations, if you're, you're not born to be instantly made a CEO upon adulthood, probably, right? So
Yeah.
if you're in a larger organization, you don't go straight to the top typically.
Of course.
So you're going to need to, but the only way to get there is to get known by somebody
Yeah.
so you can keep advancing. You should be doing good work. You should do what you say you're going to do. You should own your mistakes, things like that. But if you can also leverage an outside force like LinkedIn and you are promoting like a consistent view on how to be great at sales, whatever the topic happens to be, if it is a great I'm also sort of obsessed with side doors. So if you can not have to pound through the front door to get to a potential client that you want to work with or a partner or whatever, and you can find somebody who's of a like mind with you and is interested in things, and you can start to have a conversation with them. For me, it's primarily on LinkedIn, but it could be Twitter, YouTube, Instagram,
Yeah.
name your channel.
Yeah.
But that can help you scoot around some of the things that are meant to keep you out or prevent you from advancing, and sidestep it and maybe jump into maybe you got a job at your dream company but it's not the dream position, but you're starting to get known by the people in that area that you want to
Yeah.
go to, really. And if you get on their radar, then it's much easier for them to say, hey, I'd like you to join my team, instead of you telling your boss, I don't like you
Yeah.
and I want to go work over here.
Yeah.
It's a very different dynamic. So you can sort of plant these seeds and see what happens. There's no guarantee, but if you don't do that, it's much
Yeah.
harder.
I'm smiling here for everyone who is just listening on audio because I actually got my first job at HP back then when I was also an IT guy, more or less
Oh,
like
okay.
this. And to be honest, I just remember the moment when I was talking with a person who is what 7 or 8 years younger than me, and but he really wanted to become a speaker in the IT world. In
Hmm.
his case, I was doing databases in the Microsoft world, SQL Server, etc. He was in the development world, but in the dev community, and he just wanted to get out and speak so that he builds that career because he saw it, no matter how that sounds from me, and he thought that it's cool. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I remember saying him, which connects extremely to the points that you're making, is his name is Preslav. If he's listening, probably he'll remember that conversation that we had with him, that every single conference that he gets to, because I told him write a few talks, like write the session title and the abstract. I helped him a little bit there, and I just told him submit it everywhere. You don't have to care, like, especially if you're trying to start, just submit it everywhere. Most of the places
Mm-hmm.
they will say no because they don't know you, they don't have a clue for you. And of course, events,
Right.
as you know, and as I know now, they have some politics behind them. Like there are some things that you cannot know as a candidate speaker. But I remember
Yeah.
telling him, hey, if you get accepted to speak somewhere, after the speaking thing ends, you have to have a place, be that your blog, be that a LinkedIn be that a LinkedIn post, be that a Medium post, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Where
Right.
you just write 2 or 3 paragraphs of, I spoke at this event, here is how it was, and
Yeah.
here's what I
Right.
delivered, here is my materials, here is my code, or whatever you decide to share. Because as you
Right.
started in the beginning, probably in the first few minutes, you said people will be Googling and will be finding things. And based on those things, they will decide, hey, wait a minute, we need to have him for our event now. He obviously
Yeah.
spoke at this event. He did great. There are some photos. There is proof. The presentation look really nice. The demos look,
Right.
look cool. Why don't we have him for our event? And from there, just it goes on, again, a chain reaction.
Right, right. Yeah, let me I just want to pop this out. So I have a really good friend who I won't name the company he works for,
Sure.
but he's been in sales for a long time.
Yeah.
He actually doesn't like sales, He just has a large family and needs that ability to really spike his income potentially from large commissions
Got
to
it.
be able to afford to have a large family. His real passion is in a combination of sustainability and sort of understanding the personality mindset of people to make better, bigger, better teams, or at least better teams. And I've been telling him for at least 10 years. I was like, you and I have talked about these things often. So I know that you're passionate about this. You know a ton about it. Nobody else knows
Hmm.
because you have never put that out there
True.
in any way at all.
Yeah.
I was like, so
Any shape or form.
I kind of don't want to talk about this with you anymore because it's, I'm interested as well to a certain extent, and then I'm not interested anymore. But there's got to be other people who are definitely interested in this. If you would let them know that you wrote something, you presented something, you gave a 5 minute talk, I don't know, whatever it is,
Yeah.
put it out there so maybe other people can find you, or when you reach out to other people, because he was networking and trying to find people that had jobs that took advantage of those kinds of things. When you reach out to them, you can say, "Hey, I wrote one thing, five things, 100 things. I did all these, whatever. And I'd love to talk to you about potentially working at wherever you are." That's a very different conversation than just reaching out to them blind, which he was not. He wasn't afraid to do that. It just wasn't effective. He's
Yeah.
on the phone all the time doing $1 million, multi-million-dollar deals, and like, well, it's great that you don't have any fear in reaching out to these people and having a conversation,
Yeah.
but think how much easier it would be if you could warm them up by putting things out there so they could judge for themselves whether they want to pick up the phone in the first place enthusiastically.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Completely agree. Dan, it's already 36 minutes. Let's go with
Oh
one
my
more.
God.
Yeah, let's go with one more because I'm curious about your opinion of what happens after the presentation is over. Because if you want to try and continue the relationship, probably I said a few things and said, hey, why don't you mention that you presented here and there in one way or the other with a photo, with a video. Nowadays, especially the video format is super popular, etc. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
about continuing that relationship with the audience after the presentation is over?
Right. Yeah. So I like beautifully designed slides, and in general, partly because of my Danish ancestry, probably,
Yeah.
simplicity, which also sort of factors into the design of PlexiCam, for example. But you sort of need to you don't need to be pushy, but you need to make it easy for people to find you again. You hinted at that at
Mm,
least at some
yeah.
point here. So when Twitter was really big for me, I got involved in Twitter early on, and then I burned out, and I've mostly only partially paid attention to Twitter in the last 5 years or so.
Same.
Um, it's there's only so many things you can do,
Yeah, I mean, I
but
remember, by the way, sorry to interrupt you. I remember that back
yeah,
then in my IT career, like Twitter was extremely hot. I think probably it is still hot, very hot. And I remember that
yeah,
we were tracking with this app that was called TweetDeck.
yeah,
We were monitoring some hashtags, and there was
yeah,
one hashtag probably it still is there, which was called SQL help. And that SQL help tag, like I can easily say that there were at least 10 people that were constantly monitoring that one and were trying to respond first to the person who had issue or any
yeah,
question or problem,
yep,
just for the sake of visibility, branding, etc. I did
yeah,
that for so long, but that, again, back to our whole conversation, and I'm giving it back to you, that actually created the name for me and allowed me to speak in so many countries when I was super
mhm,
super young. So sorry for,
yeah.
yeah, just when you say Twitter, I'm like, I remember that era.
Yeah, I mean, once upon a time, I was in the top 10 most influential Twitter users in the Boston area,
Wow,
and
that's
that
crazy.
was,
I haven't got to that level.
well, I mean, I spent a lot of time on Twitter, and that's part of the reason that I ended up with the story that I already told.
Yeah, of course.
Um, so I'll try to tie it to what we already talked about and
Yeah.
what you just asked. So the first keynote that I ever presented was at a 5,000 person event called the Enterprise 2.0 conference in Boston, and I had been very active on Twitter. That was a hot topic in Twitter,
Hmm.
and as a result, I was pretty well known. Um, and the moment that I walked off the stage, there were literally like 30 people standing right off the stage. I knew all of them, even though I'd never met any of them.
Because of Twitter.
And it was awesome. And I walked out, I was like, oh my God, it's Laura and it's Bob and it's and I wasn't monitoring because at that point I wasn't comfortable trying to monitor hashtags as you're presenting. That was a thing for a while where one screen was dedicated. Here's a huge stream of
Yeah,
stuff just
yeah,
flying
yeah,
by.
yeah.
That I love the idea, but that was not for me, and it's still not for me. but uh,
Not for me
but
anymore
that was
either.
I mean, to what we've been talking about, because I was already known, that was they could have never seen me do a keynote before that because I had never done one before
Yeah,
that. And I punctuated it, and we were presenting some fresh research about big companies and how they're using these technologies, which was a huge topic. That was the topic of that event, what ran for 7 years or so, I want to say. And that and there was my tribe, so to speak. And then as a result of that, that's part of the reason that I got known by Kevin, because he was part of a group of large enterprise customers who cared about Enterprise 2.0.
yeah.
And that's how he had started stalking me, because he actually was not allowed to post anything on Twitter
Okay.
because of legal concerns by the Lowe's law department. And and on all of my slides at that point, I would have at Dan Keldsen, because that was my Twitter handle, and that's where all the action was happening. And as I didn't know it at the time, but I suspected that by the time I got off the stage, there would be a bunch of tweets referencing me, pointing to me, building out more awareness about what I was doing and the things that I care about. And all you have to do is set the stage for that. Not no pun intended. Just set it so that you've made that environment where it's possible that people can find you, want to refer you. Like, hey, at Dan Kelson, you should talk to Luis Suarez,
Yeah,
who's an IBM guy that I still talk to, and it's been 14 years since we first met.
yeah. So that is the potential of, yeah. I always, yeah. I mean, I'm still amazed that people don't understand how big one presentation can be for them. Like, I'm still
Yeah.
amazed. The cool part is that they now people slowly but steadily start to realize it, probably because of the examples that become very commercial, like the product keynotes that happen, like Apple,
Hmm.
Microsoft, and all of those guys. um, because you experience it yourself, like just because of one presentation, there are people spending thousands and thousands of dollars or or euro or whatever it is on a product that
Right.
was just released. And then
Yeah.
it if, for example, it happens to you and you listen to this podcast, or you read an article, or you were part of an event like ours, or whatever it is, you take some of those advices and you apply them and you see that it works and it catapults your career. You are like, wait a minute, why did I miss so many opportunities like those before? I still think and believe that. And I actually was in a meeting with the CEO of petrol station, one of the biggest petrol stations here in the region, like 2 days
Hmm.
ago. By the way, first of all, I have never ever experienced the CEO of a company using so many words that are starting with the F word for an hour. Like, I was amazed. Like, our meeting
Fuel.
was scheduled for 15 minutes. He stayed with me, not I stayed with him. He wanted to stay with me for an hour and a half. In that hour and a half, he said the F word and the S words so many times. I was like, Jesus, this guy is really sick of bad presentations from his peers, like that is, yeah, yeah. And I remember telling him and his HR person that, like, people really, really don't understand the impact of a presentation. Like,
Hmm.
just one, just
Yeah.
just one. If they do just one right, everything can change. And I still believe that presentations, like, if you mix them up with your skill, let's say it's finance, it's HR, it's marketing, whatever, it's IT, whatever. If you have
Mhm.
this combo, right, those two, that is the fastest way, one of the fastest ways for a lot of doors to open to you that you would not be able to open potentially any other way, or it will just take you a ton more time. Like,
Right. Well, and it's very different if somebody else opens the door for you and invites you in instead of you having to knock
yeah,
and wonder if anybody's there.
yeah, that is true. Then we always ask the question, who else should we get on this podcast? Someone that's one name, obviously, someone from the presentation industry, or somebody that in the last whatever years made an impression on you with their presentation communication skills. Do you have a name on top of your mind? Let's see.
Hmm.
Just one
Yeah.
name though.
Yeah. So, if you're interested in innovation as a topic,
Yeah, let's go.
Stephen Shapiro is a good friend of mine.
All
Um,
right.
I'm totally blanking out his latest book, and I put it back upstairs in my library, so to speak. But Stephen Shapiro, he's really well known in the innovation space. He's a world class speaker. He was on the board of directors or the advisory board for the National Speakers Association in the
All right.
U.S.
That's nice.
Uh, very good. Yeah, he's got a lot to say, but and he's more focused on um, sort of presenting as an experience, I would say. So he uses slides minimally typically, and he's more interested in storytelling and whatnot. But
Mm.
he's really good, and he's a super nice guy.
Okay, you can introduce us to both, and let's see how that
Sure.
we'll see how it goes. Okay, where can people? One last here. We always ask a two-part question. What is the best channel for people to reach out and ask questions? And where can they find more about PlexiCam?
Sure. So PlexiCam is PLEXICAM.com. And, a relatively short domain. Thankfully, it's still hard, to find
Yeah.
shorter names these days, but thankfully that's pretty good. It's probably best to. I'd love to connect with people around the world. I value lots of diverse opinions and experiences and different disciplines, languages, all of that kind of stuff. Partly influenced by my younger daughter, who is a hyper polyglot and has self taught herself over 30 languages, which still kind of blows my
Wow.
mind. So if she wasn't in school right now, I was going to have her come on and speak to you in Bulgarian, but that she
Wow.
needed to be in
How
high
old is
school.
she?
She's 16. Yeah,
That's
I don't understand.
yeah, that is hard to understand. Yeah, that is hard.
But LinkedIn is the best place to find me. So linkedin.com/in/Dan Keldsen. Keldsen is Keldsen. And
Yeah.
by the way, this drives me sort of insane, so I'll just mention it. If you have not personalized your LinkedIn URL, please put your own name as the in slash whatever. Do not make it Boris 10,053.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Another pro tip here, everybody.
There
Absolutely.
you go.
Completely agree. Then we'll make sure that we link both your LinkedIn profile and the PlexiCam's website. Super huge fan also of the company. So many other speakers, and not only a lot of business professionals obviously utilize the product for, like, in order for them to deliver better virtual presentations, because virtual presentations are here to stay, and many people obviously see how that world goes and adapt
Yeah.
in this way. So not just the camera is important, but the position of the camera is
Yes.
crucial, is absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
And the products that you guys are doing are so elegant. It's
Thank
I
you.
think definitely everyone should check them out. Dan, thank you so much for joining me for those. Let me take a look on the left. 48 minutes and 9 seconds.
Thanks, Boris.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. All of the links that Dan just mentioned will be in the show notes, no matter where you are consuming this episode, be that on a SoundCloud, Spotify platform, or YouTube. And in the meantime, once you check his website and connect with him on LinkedIn, take a look at what we're doing at 356labs.com. And if you still don't know about Present to Succeed conference, well, it's finally, it's, I think, time for you to fix that. All right. So thank you for listening, everyone. Subscribe, like, follow, comment. You know how it goes. And see you in the next one.